Ichigo is not a Soul Reaper. Let me explain. First off, let's start with his parents. His father, Isshin, was born a Soul Reaper, of course, but he gave up that power, and we'll get to that eventually. His mother, Masaki Kurosaki, was a pureblood Quincy, and a powerful one at that. But the most important thing to know about Ichigo, and the most important power he has, begins right here with this hollow known as White. I believe he was nicknamed by either Tosin or Gin because he is actually all black, which contrasts what most hollows usually look like. This hollow appears as a Vastolorde, almost, but it's not really a hollow at all if you think about it. It's more like a Zanpakuto spirit that has physically manifested itself. As we know, Aizen created White by layering many Shinigami souls together in a process similar to that of Oetsu's when it comes to creating an Asauchi. Therefore, White is not a real hollow. He is made entirely of Shinigami souls. And yet those souls were layered into a manifestation that is very hollow-like. Now, we learn in Everything But the Rain that this hollow, named White, is actually less of a Zanpakuto and more of an incubation device. Aizen's original plan was to lure a captain to the world of the living, and he intended for this hollow known as White to actually bite and infect that captain. And you may be wondering, why would he do this? But let's go back to Turn Back the Pendulum. This isn't even the first time he's tried this. Back in Turn Back the Pendulum, we saw as he attempted to holofy, or more accurately, hybridize several members of the 𝐓𝐇𝐄 13, including Shinji Hirako, Rosatori Otoribashi, and Kensei Rugaruma, among others. And this is what led to the creation of the Vizards, which aren't a race, by the way. They are just failed experiments, which is exactly what Aizen called them, and that's exactly what they are. Ichigo and the Vizards are not the same, and I'll cover that later on in the video as well. Now, back to the plot. Once Aizen had lured Captain Shiba, Ichigo's father, to the world of the living in order to fight against the hollow known as White, he was surprised that the Quincy, Masaki Kurosaki, intervened, and she herself became the target of White. White chooses to incubate the Quincy instead of the Soul Reaper. And of course Tosin tries to put a stop to this, but Aizen tells him to wait. He's excited to see where this is going to go. This is an experiment, of course, and this is an unknown variable. This leads to Kisuke Urahara and Isshin Shiba coming together in order to save Masaki's life from the hollow poisoning that's killing her since she is a Quincy. And in order to do that, unlike the Soul Reapers or the Vizards before her, she has no Shinigami power to balance out the hollow power. Therefore, Kisuke has Isshin sacrifice the entirety of his Shinigami powers in order to build a wall between Masaki's Quincy and now newfound hollow abilities, allowing her to live a normal life. And after this moment, she isn't really a hybrid. That hollow known as White is simply trapped inside of her behind a barrier created using Isshin's spiritual pressure. Isshin himself, no longer being a Shinigami, has to enter a human body created by Kisuke Urahara and live a human life. Alright, now, in order to fully explain why Ichigo himself is not a real true Soul Reaper, I have to explain Ichigo's conception, unfortunately. At the time of his conception, his father, a now completely powerless Shinigami inside of a human body, procreated with his mother, a very powerful Quincy, with the spiritual pressure of the hollow known as White inside of her, as well as the Shinigami spiritual pressure given to her by Isshin, her husband. What this leads to is Masaki passing down the spiritual pressure from all three sources inside of her body to her son when she gives birth. Therefore, Ichigo is born in a human body with Quincy spiritual pressure, Shinigami spiritual pressure, and spiritual pressure from the experiment created by Aizen, or the hollow known as White, essentially making him the closest thing to the original Ryo to walk the earth ever since the original Ryo. Now, let's fast forward to the first time when Ichigo gets his Shinigami powers. He receives them, or manifests them rather, by absorbing Rukia's Shinigami power. And as we learn later, he didn't absorb all of her power, just the vast majority of it. And as we also learn later at the end of the Fullbringer arc, Even after Ichigo gave up all of his spiritual pressure by using Mugetsu, his true powers still remain, just buried deep within. What I'm suggesting is, and this is only speculation, when Ichigo received Rukia's Shinigami spiritual pressure, he did not become a Shinigami. His own Ryatsu simply mimicked that of hers as it was being absorbed. Now, let's talk about how Ichigo got his powers back after Byakuya used his Bankai, Senkei, and Aikido to attack Ichigo's Saketsu and Hakusui, which are pressure points in a Shinigami's body, all the way back at the beginning of the series. This action sealed Ichigo's Shinigami powers, leaving him unable to manifest his spiritual abilities, but it did not destroy his chain of fate. Speaking of his chain of fate, severing it is exactly how Ichigo re-manifested his powers. Urahara deliberately cut it in an attempt to risk Ichigo's life by separating his soul from his body, forcing him to undergo holification and regain his powers. Either Ichigo was going to re-manifest spiritual pressure or he would holify, which is very important because this is the first time we actually see the hollow mask. And this moment indicates that maybe Ichigo developed his hollow powers here, but we know that this isn't the case though. In reality, what happened in this moment is Ichigo fought against the holification and re-manifested his original spiritual pressure, and White just so happened to be a part of that. So even when he did get his powers back, he didn't pop up as a Shinigami, he literally popped up with a hollow mask on his face. Once again, he's not a real Soul Reaper at this point. And he isn't a visored either because 𝐓𝐇𝐄𝐌 didn't have to balance out the hollow and Soul Reaper abilities. He didn't have to put up a barrier or anything to keep the hollow from overtaking the Soul Reaper Ryatsu. Ichigo had his own natural balance from the beginning. Now, this form right here is the most important one and the one we're going to be talking about the most, because I consider this form to be the same as all of these. And I'm sure you'll disagree with me. If you do, let me know in the comment section. But let's break this down. All of these forms have a few things in common. Number one, no Asauchi. Not a single one of these forms uses a Zanpakuto that was actually made with an Asauchi, meaning that none of these Zanpakuto that Ichigo has been using are even real Zanpakuto. By the definition of what a Zanpakuto is, it needs an Asauchi. I can't count his hollow mask as a different form since he popped back up literally with the mask on his face. I can't count his Vasto Lorde transformation as a different form since it's simply his mask at its full evolution. And I can't even really count the Dangai form either, since we only ever see him in his Bankai and we have literally no idea what's happening here other than what Aizen says, but Aizen says a lot of stuff. Like, come on, let's be real. And Mugetsu is a Shiba family clan technique, so we cannot count that as a transformation. Therefore, all of these forms are one and the same, to me, at least during this discussion. And remember, this is only speculation. The second thing these forms have in common is that not a single one of them conforms to any race's specific abilities. Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho has always been somewhat of a hollow-like attack, but also you could argue maybe it's a Quincy-like attack. Either way, his main ability is to fire a blast of Ryatsu from his blade, kinda like how hollows are able to fire Seros, meaning that even when he fought Kenpachi, and we know when he fought Byakuya, he was not only fighting as a Shinigami, but also as a hollow. And the reason why is because he is not a Shinigami, he is a hybrid being. And he was forcing his hollow spiritual pressure deep down because he was afraid of it. So let's go on ahead and wrap this up because I don't want to make this video too long. Ichigo became a Soul Reaper because the first thing he saw was Rukia, a Soul Reaper. Then he loses his power. Ichigo develops a Shikai because he meets Renji and Byakuya and sees their Shikai. Then all of a sudden he has one too. After defeating Kenpachi, Ichigo is constantly threatened by Byakuya's Bankai. Everyone warns him about it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it only takes him about a week to achieve a Bankai. Once again, when his enemy has something, he all of a sudden is able to achieve it too. The Visored show up and tell Ichigo that he's one of them. And now all of a sudden, he's a Visored as well. You guys know the meme, Ichigo is everything. But that's the point though, he's not. He's a hybrid. Because you see, all these powers originate with the original Ryo. They all come from him in one way, shape, form, or fashion. Meaning the Ryo himself could choose to be any one of these races or manifest himself as any one of these races. if he intended to. He can use all of these abilities. And we've already covered, Ichigo is the closest thing to the original Rayo walking the earth currently. It's no coincidence that he becomes every race that he meets. He's not becoming a new race, he's not a mixture of every single thing. He's simply built like the Rayo, and he's able to mimic anyone's abilities because they originated from the abilities of a hybrid. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I know I left out the 1,000-Year Blood War. We're gonna leave out spoilers and stuff like that for the people who haven't watched the new anime yet. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe if you want to support the channel. I appreciate it.